There's a stretch of highway in western Pennsylvania that doesn't appear on most maps. The locals call it the Hollow Road. It's not that the road itself is particularly remarkable, just a two-lane blacktop cutting through about 30 miles of dense forest between the small towns of Millbrook and Harpersville. What makes the Hollow Road noteworthy isn't what you can see, but what you can't. I first heard about it from my Uncle Frank, who drove a delivery truck for nearly 40 years. Uncle Frank wasn't the type for tall tales or ghost stories. He was a practical man who believed in what he could see with his own eyes, touch with his own hands. So when he told me about the Hollow Road one Thanksgiving after he'd had a few too many beers, I paid attention. "Never take that road after dark," he said, his voice low despite the football game blaring on the TV behind us. "Especially not when you're alone." According to Uncle Frank, there had been an unusual number of disappearances along that stretch of highway over the years. Not just people, but entire vehicles. They'd enter the forest at one end and simply never emerge from the other. The official records would attribute these disappearances to driver error, mechanical failure, or people deliberately vanishing to escape their lives. But the locals knew better. I didn't think much of his warning at the time. I lived in Pittsburgh, over 100 miles away, and had no reason to ever drive the Hollow Road. But 5 years later, when I took a job at a regional newspaper that covered that exact area, his words came back to me. My first few months at the Millbrook Gazette were uneventful. I covered town council meetings, local sports, and the occasional human interest story. Nothing that would make national headlines, but it was honest work, and I was happy enough doing it. Then, one rainy Tuesday in October, my editor called me into his office. "There's been another one," he said, without preamble. "On the Hollow Road. I want you to look into it." Another missing person case, a 34-year-old woman named Sarah Keller, who had been driving from Harpersville to Millbrook for a job interview. Her car was found abandoned at a pull-off about halfway along the Hollow Road, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat. There was no sign of Sarah herself. I spent the next few days interviewing local police, Sarah's family, and anyone who might have seen her that day. The official line was that she had likely wandered into the forest for some reason and gotten lost. Search parties had combed the area but found nothing. No footprints, no torn clothing, no sign that Sarah Keller had ever stepped foot outside her vehicle. What struck me as odd was how unsurprised everyone seemed. Concerned, yes. Sad, certainly. But not surprised. It was as if they had been expecting this, as if disappearances along the Hollow Road was simply an accepted fact of life in these parts. I decided to dig deeper. I went through the newspaper's archives looking for similar cases. What I found was disturbing. Over the past 50 years, there had been 27 documented disappearances along that same stretch of road. 27 people who had vanished without a trace. Some had been found later, or at least traces of them had. Others, like Sarah Keller, were simply gone. But it wasn't just the number that bothered me. It was the pattern. All of the disappearances had occurred after dark. All of them had happened when the person was traveling alone. And all of them had taken place during the last quarter of the lunar cycle, when the night is at its darkest. I took my findings to my editor, expecting him to be as disturbed as I was. Instead, he sighed and closed the folder without looking at it. "Leave it alone, James," he said. "Some stories aren't meant to be told." But I couldn't leave it alone. I kept digging, interviewing older residents who remembered the earlier disappearances, consulting weather records, lunar charts, anything that might help me make sense of what was happening on the Hollow Road. That's when I started noticing the other pattern. The timing. The disappearances weren't random. They occurred in clusters, every 7 years. 7 years almost to the day. And if my calculations were correct, we were currently in the middle of one of those clusters. Sarah Keller wouldn't be the last to vanish. I tried to warn people. I wrote an article detailing my findings, urging people to avoid the Hollow Road after dark, especially during the current lunar phase. My editor refused to publish it. Mass hysteria, he called it. Irresponsible journalism. So I took matters into my own hands. I printed flyers, posted warnings on local message boards, even stood at the entrances to the road with a sign. Most people ignored me. Some laughed, a few listened, but I doubt they took me seriously. And then came the night I decided to see for myself what was happening on the hollow road. It was stupid, I know that now, but I was frustrated by the lack of attention my warnings were receiving, and I thought if I could just document something, anything, people would have to listen. So I packed my car with cameras, voice recorders, a night vision scope I'd borrowed from a hunter friend, and enough coffee to keep me awake until dawn. Then I drove to the Millbrook end of the hollow road and waited for nightfall. The first few hours were uneventful. A few cars passed by, heading in both directions. I noted their license plates, the times they passed. Around midnight, the traffic stopped completely. I sat in my car, the only sound the soft patter of rain on the roof and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. At 2:17 a.m., I remember checking my watch. I saw headlights approaching from the Harpersville direction. A single vehicle, moving at a normal speed. I started one of my cameras recording and watched as the car, a dark sedan of some kind, passed my position and continued down the road, its red taillights gradually fading into the distance. Except they didn't fade completely. About a half-mile down the road, the taillights seemed to stop. I assumed the driver had pulled over for some reason, though there wasn't a proper pull-off at that location that I knew of. I waited for the lights to start moving again, but they remained stationary. After about 5 minutes, I decided to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and my camera and began walking down the road toward the stopped vehicle. The rain had picked up, and the wind was stronger now, sending sheets of water into my face despite the hood of my raincoat. I kept my eyes fixed on those taillights, using them as a beacon in the darkness. It wasn't until I was about 100 yards away that I realized something was wrong. The taillights weren't attached to a car, they were just lights. 2 red dots hovering about 3 feet off the ground, perfectly spaced to resemble the rear of a vehicle, but with nothing connecting them. No car body, no frame, nothing. I stopped dead in my tracks. The rational part of my brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe the car was there, but my eyes weren't registering it in the darkness. Maybe it was some kind of optical illusion caused by the rain and the late hour. But deep down, I knew. There was no car. There had never been a car. And then the lights began to move. Not forward or backward along the road, but upward, rising slowly into the air until they were about 10 feet off the ground. They hung there for a moment, and then began moving toward me. I'd like to say I stood my ground, that I raised my camera and documented whatever was approaching me on that lonely stretch of road in the middle of the night. But the truth is, I ran. I turned and sprinted back to my car as fast as my legs would carry me, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly ahead of me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't look back until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door unlocked. When I finally did glance over my shoulder, the road behind me was empty. No floating lights, no mysterious car, nothing but rain and darkness. I drove home well above the speed limit, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see those red lights following me. But there was nothing. By the time I reached my apartment, I had almost convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing, that it had been some kind of hallucination brought on by fatigue and suggestion. Almost, but not quite. The next morning, I reviewed the footage from my camera. Most of it showed exactly what I remembered. Me walking down the road in the rain, the beam of my flashlight illuminating the wet asphalt ahead of me. But there was no sign of the red lights I'd seen, no evidence of anything unusual at all, just an empty road on a rainy night. I might have let it go at that point, chalked it up to an overactive imagination, if not for what happened 3 days later. Another disappearance on the hollow road. Another car found abandoned, its driver nowhere to be found. And when I went to the scene, standing behind the police tape as officers searched the surrounding forest, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The car had been found at exactly the same spot where I'd seen those floating lights. That was 6 months ago. Since then, there have been 2 more disappearances, both following the same pattern. The police have increased patrols along the road, installed cameras at both ends, even brought in search dogs from as far away as Ohio. they've found nothing. As for me, I've continued my research, though more discreetly now. I've spoken with historians, folklorists, even a professor of paranormal studies from a university upstate. I've compiled weather data, lunar charts, traffic patterns. And I've come to a conclusion that I can't prove, but that I believe with every fibre of my being. The hollow road is hungry. I don't mean that literally, of course. Roads can't be hungry. They can't want or need or consume. But there's something about that stretch of highway, something in the land itself perhaps, that requires a tribute. Every 7 years, it takes what it needs. 7 souls, 7 lives to sustain it until the next cycle begins. Why 7? Why every 7 years? I don't know. Perhaps it has something to do with the original construction of the road, which was completed in 1937. Perhaps it's connected to the land's earlier history. There are stories of Native American tribes that avoided that particular valley, though no one seems to know exactly why. Or perhaps the number 7 itself holds some significance that I haven't yet uncovered. What I do know is this. The current cycle isn't over. By my count, the hollow road has claimed 5 victims so far. It needs 2 more before it will be satisfied, before the disappearances will stop until the next cycle begins in 7 years. I've tried to warn people. I've written articles that my editor refuses to publish, made phone calls that go unreturned, sent emails that are dismissed as the ravings of a man who's spent too much time alone with his theories. No one wants to believe that something like this could be happening in their community, that there could be a force at work that defies rational explanation. But I know what I saw that night on the hollow road. I know that there are things in this world that we don't understand, forces that operate according to rules we can't comprehend. And I know that until the cycle is complete, until the hollow road has taken its final 2 victims, no one who travels that road alone after dark is safe. So if you find yourself driving through western Pennsylvania and your GPS suggests a shortcut between Millbrook and Harpersville, do yourself a favor. Take the long way around, because the hollow road is always there, always waiting. And when night falls and the moon wanes, it gets hungry. I've been careful since that night, never driving the road after dark, never travelling it alone. But lately, I've been having dreams. Dreams of red lights in the darkness calling to me, drawing me back to that spot on the hollow road. And sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, I could swear I hear the soft hum of an engine idling outside my window, waiting. I've started keeping track of the lunar cycle. The last quarter of the moon begins next Tuesday. I've already requested the day off work, already made plans to stay with a friend in Pittsburgh, far away from the hollow road and whatever walks it after dark. But part of me wonders if it will matter. If the road wants you, can you really escape it? Or does it simply bide its time, waiting for that one moment of weakness, that one lapse in vigilance? I don't know, but I do know this. If you're ever driving alone at night and you see a road that seems somehow darker than it should be, a stretch of highway that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up for no reason you can name, keep driving. Don't slow down, don't pull over, and whatever you do, don't stop. Because some roads don't lead anywhere you want to go. Some roads only lead in. And the hollow road is always, always hungry.